Court TV is following another big story in Utah, the Friends Suicide Pact case. Heavenly Faith Garfield pleaded guilty to manslaughter and the death of her friend Brooklyn Barrett back in April.
It's a really sad case. According to prosecutors, Garfield told investigators that she and Barrett had been planning to take their own lives for several weeks. They both had depression and other issues. Now, Garfield admitted to shooting her friend, but said when the time came, she couldn't follow through with the pact and shoot herself.
Oh, it's such an emotional case, and it's been an emotional case for both families. Today, Garfield was in court for her sentencing hearing.
Her sister and father were among several people who spoke and really became emotional when asking the court for leniency.
Heavenly Faith Garfield is my younger sister. On the morning of April 30th, 2024, I had the horrific honor of being her first call. I cannot express the immense trauma and relief that resulted from that call. The circumstances leading up to the events of April 30th are a difficult collection of trauma, depression, and suicidality. And the tragedy of that day has marked all of us. For many years, Faith and I have maintained a close and personal relationship. We confide in one another about our fears and worries. We strengthen each other. We share traditions and food and clothes. We share inside jokes and many wonderful memories. And Faith is one of my favorite people in the whole world. I love Faith very much. I want to speak of Faith's character. She lights up a room when she comes into it, and she connects deeply with people. I'm always amazed by how she's able to read me and make me feel seen. She's a gentle person with a love for animals. She would often play wrestle with my dad's dog, Arrow. And she even still asks about that dog and my pets on the calls that we get from her. Once when she came to my house in emotional distress, seeking comfort, she stopped on her way up to me to pet my cat on the stairs and tell her she was such a good kitty. She has experience working with children and would love to have that opportunity again. She understands kids and is so good with them. I've always wanted to be my nieces and nephews' favorite aunt. But even I cannot deny that Faith rightfully holds that title. And I look forward to the day that my own kids can call her their favorite aunt as well. Regardless of her circumstances, Faith lifts others up. She cares about her family and her friends. She creates unity wherever she is. There are people who are dangerous to society. Faith is not that person. There are people who act with criminal intent and have no remorse, and that is not Faith. There are people who need to be in prison and should be there for the safety of others. Again, Faith is not that person. Faith has been traumatized and needs specific, multifaceted help so that she can gain hope and meaning and a fulfilling purpose in her life. I acknowledge that her actions have brought us pain and even death. I wish it were not so, and none of us can change that. However, today this court has the opportunity to save a life that intended itself to be lost. As a family, we support Faith and love her, and whatever happens, we know her character. We eagerly await her calls and emails. We send her pictures. We arrange video chats with her, and we send her commissary. We pray for her and fast for her and cry for her. We bear this distance and this pain, and we will continue to do so no matter what the court decides today. We will continue to love her and to support her, and forever be so grateful that today we are gathered in a courtroom and not at a graveside. It is my understanding that Faith's legal team has secured a position for her at a live-in program that specializes in women's trauma. I would love to see Faith have that kind of treatment available to her in a safe place, and I ask that the court include this in Faith's future. I stand here today to honor Brooklyn and recognize her family's pain and loss. I'm also here today to express my faith and hope, both of which I thought were lost in the months following April 30th. I finally have hope again for her future and speak today with faith that the court will too. Judge Pullen, I ask that you give my sister the best chance. Thank you.
Faith is loved deeply by her siblings and her parents. She's always had a big heart, a loving personality, and she loves her friends and they love her. She loves doing service for others. She attempts to live a purpose-filled life. About 3 years ago, she began to demonstrate some new behaviors associated with anxiety and depression, and we noticed at times that she would be very sad and other times very present and engaged with friends and family. Faith sought out mental health therapy and began to practice prescribed techniques for dealing with negative thoughts and feelings. On 2 occasions last year, her feelings of self-worth hit rock bottom and she attempted suicide.
Was that in 2022?
In 2023.
2023.
More psychiatric visits occurred. Medications were prescribed and taken. A detailed treatment plan was created. Support persons were identified. A plan of who to call when feeling certain anxiety or depression or if having suicide ideology thoughts. Last year, Faith and Brooklyn's friendship grew. They started doing more things together. At some point, they realized that they both thought about suicide. Their friendship increased and they became roommates in Saratoga Springs. Outwardly to their friends and family, they were just okay, hanging in there, feeling down and out at times, and other times acting happy. Apparently, in early April this year, they accepted that they both wanted the same thing, and they began to get ready to carry out a suicide pact. They took a few weeks, stopped working, did some traveling together, and then on a Monday afternoon, they went into a Saratoga Springs gun store, purchased a handgun and ammunition. They wrote out specific suicide notes to their families, even detailing which clothing to be buried in and what music to be played at the funeral. Faith sent me a text at 49 minutes after midnight. I love you. I read it at 7:30 in the morning, and I responded with a symbol, a heart, and I love you. These girls cared deeply for each other. They sought peace in death. Neither one wanted to keep living. Sometime on Tuesday morning, 2 bullets were removed from the box, placed into the clip. The clip was loaded into the handgun, and Brooklyn asked Faith to discharge the first bullet into her while she lied in bed. Sometime that morning, that was agreed upon. As terrible and tragic as it is, did happen. Then when Faith attempted to discharge the second bullet, her suicide efforts failed. Later that morning, Faith came to see me at home, and about an hour later told me about the night before and the events of the morning. Together, we drove back to her place, and I stood there with Faith and called 911. My heart breaks for the loss of life of Brooklyn. It breaks for Faith and all that has happened. As a parent, I feel like a failure. I didn't think anything like this was going to happen. I'm so sorry that it all happened. My daughter loved Brooklyn. My daughter is desperate need of continued mental health treatment. She needs specific therapy. We request mercy for her. We request that she be sentenced to parole and sent to live in Morgan, Utah at the Reprieve Home for Women of Trauma. Thank you, Your Honor.
Here to discuss former prosecutor, criminal defense, and civil rights attorney Sue Ann Robinson. And Sue Ann and Michael, I mean, it's such a hard, sad case. And I was just saying depression can be a horrible thing to battle. But at the end of the day, the reality is, even though all of the text messages and the letters pointed to the fact, yes, this was a suicide pact, Sue Ann, she still killed her friend. I mean, that at the end of the day is still the truth of the matter.
Absolutely, and it's unlawful for her to assist in a suicide, whether they're of age or not. That cannot be done, and she was actually charged under the statute for that specifically. So, you know, it's a terrible case. It is them choosing a permanent solution to temporary, you know, emotional unrest. And it's very sad. And so I think this part of the process, the fact that she took a plea, obviously, because there was so much evidence surrounding the actual pact that they made with each other, phone calls to other people, text messages to other people outlining their plans and things like that. It was undeniable that that was happening. But even her taking the plea shows, you know, she's taking responsibility for her part in it. I think it's going to be very hard to sentence her under these circumstances. Very difficult situation to sentence someone under.
Yeah, she was facing murder. She pled to the manslaughter. And here's my struggle with that quickly, Sue Ann. You know, she's alive because she couldn't pull the trigger. Her friend couldn't pull the trigger, but she took that decision away from her by shooting her. Yeah. And that's the only problem I have with it, that this still feels like assisted suicide and murder to me. And I think there was a lot of mercy shown by prosecutors dropping this to a manslaughter and facing 1 to 15.
Absolutely. And I think they dropped it, and I think they did that because they are taking into account everything, the entire circumstance. And they're also giving a lot of grace to Ms. Garfield in agreeing with the fact that there was some sort of agreement between her and Brooklyn that Brooklyn would be the first one to be shot, obviously, because as you said, Michael, that she took the decision away. Yes, but the state is relying on Ms. Garfield's statement that they agreed for it to happen in this order. And so if that was the agreement, whether obviously it was an illegal agreement, I think the state is taking that into the account when they changed the charge.
Yeah. Both of them were under treatment for depression, as you mentioned, and also Garfield had tried to commit suicide twice before. Yeah. So this was something that was sort of brewing around both of these really just tragic young women. All right. Sue Ann, stand by. We're going to take a break, folks. When we come back, we hear the emotional statements from both the defense attorney and the prosecutor as they plead their arguments to the judge. That's next when Court TV Live returns.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott.
And I'm Michael Ayala. We are continuing our coverage in the Friends Suicide Pact case in Utah. Defendant Heavenly Faith Garfield faces prison time for shooting and killing her friend, Brooklyn Barrett, back in April. Now, Garfield told investigators that she was supposed to take her own life as well, but she ended up not doing that.
And in her sentencing hearing today, you could feel the emotional impact of the case, even when attorneys on both sides pleaded their cases before the judge. Let's take a listen to those attorneys.
Your Honor, this is it's a difficult circumstance here today, and suicide is a difficult topic to talk about. To me, just personally, it seems to be a more and more common topic. It's come up, and it's affected me personally as well as in my job. The court has difficult decisions to make. We were here yesterday on a case that involved a death as well. And I don't envy the court's position to have to deal with these very sad circumstances, sometimes on a daily basis. The defense team has tried to make this decision for the court a little bit easier. And we provided the court and got Miss Garfield into a treatment center that is perfectly suited for this offense and for her and for rehabilitation. Society has determined that not every manslaughter case is a prison case. If so, prison would be mandatory, as it is in many of the criminal offenses in our criminal code. And society, through the legislature, has given the court the discretion to consider the circumstances of each case and not impose prison in some manslaughter cases. This is one of those cases. Your Honor, we ask that the court give Ms. Garfield probation in this case. Along with that, we ask the court require her as part of that probation to complete the reprieve program and the aftercare as described by Ms. Aldana. And we ask that the tragedy of this case stop here, and that Ms. Garfield receive a chance to turn her life around.
Clearly evidenced here today and by the letters that the court received, she does have a very supportive family and network, and she seems to know and appreciate this. After taking Brooklyn's life, she did reach out to family members. They called 911 and she turned herself in. She does seem to demonstrate a willingness to take accountability that we don't often see, especially at this level. I believe that she does feel remorse for her action. In small part, I think that's demonstrated by the pink tulips that she placed upon Brooklyn's body after the fact, which Brooklyn asked for in her suicide note. Your Honor, the state is still asking for prison in this case, but not out of draconian punishment. And I especially want Ms. Garfield to understand why that is our request. Prison undoubtedly is a harsh and difficult environment for any defendant. And due to Ms. Garfield's age and circumstances, it may be even more so. It can be natural to look at this case and conclude that I believe Angel said it more eloquently than I will, but conclude that one young life has been taken. Why destroy another by sending her to prison? Indeed, one of the functions of prison is punishment, but I think its other purposes often get overlooked or discounted. The success of these other purposes in large part do depend on the offender's willingness to take advantage of them, to make good choices while in prison, and to associate with helpful people. I understand that she probably fully believes she was helping Brooklyn out by making this decision, and that they would find peace together through this act. But it's thoroughly misguided. And it's a decision that she made due to the level that her mental health concerns were able to reach. Prison will help ensure that she cannot get to a place where she is able to do something similar again. Again, the state is not asking for prison just for the sake of it, but for the role that it plays in accountability and remorse. Remorse for what she has done is Ms. Garfield's chance to repair. Remorse demonstrates the capacity for change and to seek penance by feeling the full weight of what she has done.
Note the defense said we've gotten her into a treatment center that's perfectly suited for her, and that was in part based on social worker recommendations that have already been presented to the court.
They were asking for no jail time.
Right.
Just that treatment program, which was about 90 days. The total program is about a year, but she would either go to a treatment center and at some point be home, but never go into prison.
That's right. That's what the defense has requested. You're hearing the state's argument. We do need to step aside. When we come back, the victim's mother breaks down in court while addressing the judge and the defendant. We don't want to miss this. Stay with us here on your front row seat to justice.
Mr. Jeffrey, tell me what happened that night.
Killed my wife, I guess. I don't remember none of that.
You don't remember the fight with Lisa?
How many times did you hit her? 5.
You don't remember what her dead body looked like laying out there in front of you?
Not at all.
If you were me, would you believe you?
Interview with a Killer. Sunday, 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
We are continuing our coverage in the sentencing hearing in the Friends Suicide Pact case in Utah. Earlier, we heard the emotional statements from the family of the defendant, Heavenly Faith Garfield.
Well, now the mother of the victim, Brooklyn Barrett, is speaking, and at several moments, she addresses Garfield.
Good morning, Your Honor. I wanted to let you know about my beautiful daughter, Brooklyn. But I'm going to let the video that was made for her funeral show the love and light that she brought to this world. Her life was a beautiful tragedy. Brooklyn loved the natural beauty of the world and loved to photograph and draw it to find peace. Her smile and laughter were infectious, and she made people made people feel seen and loved, even in the thick of her darkness. In her short life, she had to endure so much pain and heartache. She was adopted twice and lost her adopted mom at 10, leaving a deep scar and hole in her heart that would not heal. Your Honor, we spent a lot of time and a lot of money on therapy and inpatient hospitalizations trying to get her the help that she needed. And I know it sounds bad, but I found comfort in knowing that she was too afraid to take her own life. I found peace and comfort knowing that. I wish she was still here so I could have given her that opportunity to get more help and support that she needed. Your Honor, let me take you to April 30th. It seemed like any other day. I received a text saying, "I love you, Mom," from Brooke, and I was still on cloud 9 from seeing Brooke and Faith the day before at my work, looking happy and in good spirits. At 9 p.m., my whole world changed. 2 sheriffs came to my house to inform me that my daughter was dead and it was being ruled a homicide. That night, I had no idea what had happened. I had to watch my children grieve the loss of their sister, and I was grieving the loss of my daughter. The next morning, I see on the news, and it tells me that Faith, my daughter's best friend, had shot her in a suicide pact that people knew about, and nobody decided to tell me. The one person that could have gotten her help, and both of them help. Due to Faith's actions, mine and my family's lives are forever changed. I'm dreading all the holidays coming up and the emptiness that we will fill from this year forth. I'm glad Faith is still here to be with her family and will still be able to celebrate. But I find sadness knowing I don't get that. My baby's gone. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you for your actions. Because if the roles were reversed and my daughter was sitting where you are now, I would want for her to get help. And that is all I want from you. I am extremely saddened by your choices. and the consequences you were facing for them. But I am very glad that you changed your mind. And that you stayed on this earth. Please heal yourself, Faith, and get all the help that you can so you can come out of this a changed person. And I was going to ask for a hug, but I was told it wasn't appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So you heard there at the end, Judge, she says, I was going to give you a hug, but the court told her it was inappropriate. It was more for security reasons.
Of course, it's
but who
always
can forget the
security.
hug from the Amber Geiger
Exactly,
case?
when
Just
the
incredibly
judge,
emotional.
discretion of the judge. I mean, at the end of the day, it boils down to
Yeah,
that.
it does. All right, let's bring in our guest, still with us, former prosecutor, criminal defense and civil rights attorney Sue Ann Robinson, to discuss. This is a tough one for the judge. Obviously, you see the defense asking for her to be put into an outpatient treatment program, although she would be confined for about 90 days or so, maybe even longer. State saying that, in fact, jail time is appropriate here. The mother saying, you know, I forgive you, and essentially treatment is what I would want you to get. That makes it even tougher for the judge to make a decision, Sue Ann.
Absolutely makes it tougher. And I think at the end of the day, the court has to really take into consideration, of course, the full circumstances, but obviously what the victim's family wants, what they're asking for. And if their kind of interpretation of the circumstances is that treatment is what's necessary, then it's appropriate. But the court, of course, as Judge Ashley, I'm sure, can say, is balancing the fact that this is not a legal act that occurred. Assisted suicide is not legal. And so they have to balance the fact that she has to be held accountable for her actions, not just for herself, but also for others considering doing something like this, for them to know, you know, there obviously is going to be a very strict consequence if you assist someone in suicide and it's illegal.
That's right. I was going to say it is a balancing act. I completely agree. But you also don't want to send a message that if you choose to do this and one of you dies and the other one doesn't, well, you'll go to treatment and you won't stay in jail. And so I think as a judge, I would be inclined to say it's not that difficult of a decision. There has to be some time served. Period, as accountability, but the amount of time may be where the struggle is. So, Ann, the other thing, though, is to hear the victim's mother. I mean, this is hard to watch without all of us crying, but that she said, you know, to know there was a suicide pact that others knew about, and no one told me, the one person that could have helped her, because we've been through this, we've been doing this. So I just struggle, and I know we're out of time, so I can't throw it to you, but Michael, that's the piece that really broke my heart for the victim's mother.
Everything about this case breaks your heart.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Thank you so much, Sue Ann Robinson, for joining us tonight.
Now, according to prosecutors, the two had been planning to take their lives together for weeks. Garfield's attorney says his client needs mental health treatment, not prison, but the state is pushing for at least some time behind bars. She has a choice between no time at all, the judge does, between no time and 15 years in prison for the manslaughter charge. Well, today, Barrett's family played a videotape that was shown during Brooklyn's funeral to honor her life. Take a look. All right, I want to turn now to California, where jurors heard closing arguments in the killed in the crosswalk murder trial of Brandon Janik. The prosecution claims that Janik ran a red light and hit and killed 47-year-old Joshua Gilliland as he was crossing the street. Well, Gilliland was on his way to work at a bar called Cheers, where he had worked for more than 20 years when he was killed. And witnesses say several people stopped to help the victim, but the driver, Brandon Janik, did not. Jurors are listening to closing arguments going on right now. Take a listen to the prosecution.
On June 10th of 2023, Brandon Janik murdered Joshua Gilliland. When Joshua woke up that morning, when he pressed the walk signal, when he stepped into that crosswalk, Joshua could not have known what was going to happen next. But one man, this man, knew exactly what could happen next. This man who had drank enough alcohol to have passed out behind the wheel of his car just moments earlier. This man who now drunkenly barreled down the street toward Joshua Gilliland lawfully in the crosswalk. He knew exactly what could happen next. But despite having every opportunity to stop, to pull over, and to start making the right choice, he chose only to make the fatal choice.
Well, Janik is charged with murder, gross vehicular manslaughter, felony hit and run, and felony DUI. We're going to keep you updated once the jury begins to deliberate in that case. All right, we're going to step aside here, take a break. Coming up, the sentencing phase continues for one woman's role in a suicide pact gone wrong. Heavenly Faith Garfield learns if she will spend 15 years of her life in prison after fatally shooting her friend. And then later, one of the defense attorneys in the long-running YSL RICO trial joins us right here in studio to talk about the plea deal that his client, Young Thug, or Jeffrey Williams, took, ending Georgia's longest criminal trial. All that and more coming up next. Keep it here on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, the Delphi murders trial will break down the day's biggest moments as this case nears its dramatic conclusion.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV. Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
I want to say that I absolutely hate what happened, and if I could do anything to change my actions, I would. Because I told her I would take care of her, but then I did just the opposite. And I miss her dearly every single day. And I'm so incredibly sorry to the family for taking away their confidant, their protector, and their cheerleader. She was a bright, smart, beautiful, funny, confident person who is now gone because of me. And I did everything that she wanted, but not what she needed. And I'll have to bear that guilt with me for the rest of my life. And I know that I need a lot of help. And so I trust your decision in whatever you choose for me to be the best for me in my future.
That was Heavenly Faith Garfield making a tearful apology to the family of her friend, Brooklyn Barrett. Garfield pleaded guilty to manslaughter charges in the shooting after shooting and killing Barrett back in April, after she said the two made a suicide pact and had been planning to take their lives for weeks. Now, Garfield was in court for her sentencing hearing, and we've been bringing that to you over the last hour or so. Well, now the judge is ready to begin his sentencing.
This case is monumentally sad, and I acknowledge the families of both Brooklyn and Faith who are here today. There are no winners. Everyone will leave the courtroom today heartbroken. Each family has borne the weight of this horrible event for so long, and I wish that the criminal justice system could provide to you closure and healing and a path forward, but in my experience, that has been an elusive promise. What happens here is the imposition of a just and proportionate sentence. And I suppose that closure and healing will come to you from other sources. But I earnestly hope it for all of you who are here today. I wanted to explain, Ms. Barrett, you asked if you could give Faith a hug today. For obvious security reasons, that's not permitted. Physical contact with a person in custody isn't permitted. But Faith, you should know that if that were possible, Ms. Barrett would embrace you. And I think that is certainly evidence of the sincerity of the forgiveness that she has offered to you today. I've served on the district court bench for more than 2 decades and have been witness to extraordinary acts of grace and forgiveness over many years, and that has certainly been true today. Faith, you do not deserve the forgiveness that has been offered to you. But if you deserved it, it wouldn't be grace. It wouldn't be forgiveness. And I wanted to address that issue before we moved into sentencing. In imposing sentence, the court weighs mitigating and aggravating factors. The purposes of punishment in the criminal justice system are many. First, punishment holds a criminal defendant to account for the choice to harm another person in violation of the law. When a person takes the life of another, a debt to society is incurred. The life taken cannot be restored, but the criminal law demands a just repayment from the offender, and that comes in the form of imprisonment, the loss of liberty and the quality of life that the offender might otherwise enjoy. Punishment also serves the interest of general deterrence. People who know that assisting another to commit suicide is a crime that will be punished harshly will be less likely to take the life of another under similar circumstances. Criminal punishment serves the interest of specific deterrence, and that's for this offender. During the period of time that Faith is in the county jail or in the prison, she will not have the capacity to harm another suicidal person who comes under her influence.
All right, so it sounds like the judge is leaning towards prison time. We'll have his sentence coming up in just a moment. I want to bring in our guests first. Joining us, trial attorney Gabrielle Higgins and criminal defense attorney Sam Braverman. Thank you both for joining me tonight on the program. Gabrielle, I'll begin with you. This is a bit of a tough one. It sounds like, again, the judge is moving towards prison. The defense was asking for a program, treatment program. Prison would be the wrong place for someone like this who's suffering from mental health issues and depression. Wrong place to be amongst criminals and criminal minds. There was a 90-day program, and then she'd either go into a treatment facility for a little bit more time. Overall, about a year's worth of treatment before she would be sent home, or maybe even sooner. Gabrielle, your thoughts on what's appropriate justice under these circumstances?
I think, as the court was indicating, there are multiple purposes that the court must consider in sentencing. And while it is clear that someone in this mental state who's had such a long history of mental instability, a long history of suicidal ideations, who's attempted suicide multiple times, prison isn't the place that she's going to get the necessary treatment, certainly, but the court still has a vested interest in deterring someone else from shooting their friend in the head and claiming a suicide pact. Now, in this case, there was obviously significant evidence to support a suicide pact,
But I think that she's walking out of here with a moderate amount of prison time, which is still fair given the fact that she received a lesser charge.
Yeah, I believe, Sam, that the state showed a lot of grace in their charging and ultimately deciding to give her the opportunity to plead to manslaughter. She was charged with murder under the assisted suicide laws in that state in Utah. And they ultimately dropped it to manslaughter, which gives the judge a lot of discretion, from no time in prison to 15 years in prison, which I like. I like when they do that for manslaughter because there's so many, situations that can come up under the manslaughter statutes. But quickly, your thoughts on that?
Sure. The last one that the judge probably raised, because this comes straight out of a British philosopher by the name of Jeremy Bentham, is that the fourth purpose of sentencing is institutionalized vengeance. That there is a punishment that we desire, that we want to impose, and we give that right to the state to make those punishments, and that's vengeance. So the balancing of all those things together, I agree with you 100%. That giving this wide range to Faith and to the judge is a very wise decision by the prosecutor's office. I would say that I think, it's an aggressive ask to have no jail. I don't know that I would have asked that. Clearly, she's in custody now. I don't really know how long she's been in custody. I would think that if you offered some partial jail sentence and then a process by which she transitions to mental health and then she transitions to supervision would be something that I think is much more sellable to a judge. I think when you pose it to the judge, and as the judge was just literally saying it, she forfeited her right for forgiveness. That's a strong word, and I think probably a strong indication that he thinks several years are really important here. I'm not sure that I would think that 10 or 15 is. She pled guilty, she suffered. You're really telling her she should have killed herself, which, this is a child. We don't want a child to say, I should have killed myself to avoid the jail time.
Without question. And ultimately, she made a choice not to shoot herself. She kind of took that choice away from the victim. So I can see where the judge is coming from as well. All right, stand by, guys. We're going to hit a break here. But when we come back, we're going to hear the judge's decision in the Friends Suicide Pact sentencing. We'll keep it here on your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. We are wrapping up our coverage now of the sentencing hearing in the Friends Suicide Pact case in Utah. Heavenly Faith Garfield faces prison time after pleading guilty to killing her friend Brooklyn Barrett back in April. Now, prosecutors say the two young women had made a pact to take their lives at the same time. Well, the judge is wrapping up his sentencing now, so let's listen in.
Ideally, to help the offender, we want an offender to emerge from the criminal justice system less likely to reoffend in the future. Rehabilitation often demands a more lenient period of incarceration, and it occurs in the form of treatment, education, and job skills training, for example. Of course, there is unavoidable tension in advancing each of these interests. Holding an offender accountable by imposing a lengthy prison term can result in fewer opportunities for rehabilitation, for example, or at least the postponement of those opportunities. With these purposes of the criminal justice system and punishment in mind, the court turns to mitigating factors. Here, Faith is a young person. She has participated in a voluntary screening process to address her mental health and substance abuse issues. If admitted to reprieve recovery, she would have a living environment in which offense-related treatment might be provided to her, including trauma-based therapy. Sadly, Faith was the victim of abuse herself, and that life experience has led her to a deep depression and anxiety. At the time of the offense, both Faith and Brooklyn were in the throes of that depression. They jointly entered a suicide pact. They purchased a gun for this purpose and wrote notes to their families. And by all accounts, Brooklyn asked Faith to end Brooklyn's life. Finally, in the jail, Faith has completed the RISE program and other programming available to her. Turning to aggravating factors, by shooting Brooklyn, Faith intentionally and knowingly caused the death of her best friend. This act would constitute murder under Utah law. However, in recognition of Faith's own depression and suicidality at the time this act occurred, the state offered and Faith accepted a plea bargain in which she pled guilty to the lesser offense of manslaughter, a second-degree felony. By pleading guilty to that reduced offense, Faith is exposed to a reduced penalty. And in this sense, the unique mitigating circumstances of this case that properly warrant mercy have already been weighed in the balance. Ending one's own life by violence is an extraordinary act of self-will from which many turn away, whether out of natural fear or a change of mind. That reality is the reason Faith lives today. Having witnessed the death of Brooklyn by violence, Faith gratefully lacked the will to inflict that same violence upon herself. But by taking the gun out of Brooklyn's hand and placing it in her own, Faith deprived Brooklyn of the ability to change her mind, to step back from the brink, and to choose to stay. Aiding another to commit suicide is a grave offense. And having weighed the aggravating and mitigating circumstances, the court concludes that justice demands that Faith be held accountable for that choice. By serving a prison term, society holds her to account to repay, at least in some degree, the debt she incurred when she took Brooklyn's life. And service of that prison term, in my view, will deter you from harming yourself and others. It will also serve the interests of both specific and general deterrence. Certainly there will come a time for rehabilitation, and this court certainly desires that for you. But in this case, that time must follow the imposition of a just punishment. And by bearing the full weight of the choice that you made, in my view, you will be led to be able to move forward, having paid your debt properly to society. For these reasons, the court orders that Ms. Garfield serve not less than 1 nor more than 15 years at the Utah State Prison. The court declines to impose a fine since you lack the ability to pay. Restitution will remain open for 90 days. If the state fails to seek restitution by motion during that period or an extension of time, no restitution shall be ordered. Ms. Garfield, you have 30 days to appeal the sentence if you believe that I have erred. Mr. Taylor, is there anything further?
No.
Ms. Hunt?
No, thank you, Judge.
Will you prepare the order and judgment of conviction?
I will.
Court's in recess.
All right, so the judge there in a well-reasoned decision finding balance in a 1 to 15-year sentence. What that basically means is she has to serve a year, and if she acts right, does the thing she's supposed to do, she can get out. But if she doesn't, she can serve up to the full 15. All right, let's bring back in our guest. Still with us, trial attorney Gabrielle Higgins and criminal defense attorney Sam Braverman. Sam, your reaction to the judge's decision?
Well, I agree that it was a very well-reasoned decision by the judge. I thought he was very thoughtful and laid it all out there. He defers essentially the whole thing to the Bureau of Prisons and says to them, okay, you decide. I don't know if he was able to pick a number in that range or just the range. If he was able to pick a number, then he punted the ball. And if he was not able to do so, then Utah has vested quite a bit in the Bureau of Prisons to say, you'll choose. It's a huge range. And I imagine that most parole boards are going to take the death of a child into serious consideration. And it would be so unlikely, even with great service of time, her to get out early on that sentence. I don't know what she's going to do, but that's a long bid.
Yeah, it's a long bid. Hopefully she'll be able to work it out before the 15th. Gabrielle, quickly, I thought the most poignant thing he said was it was important to him, in his thinking, that she serve time because that would help her heal and know that she paid the price and paid the debt for what she's done.
Yeah, I think what the court was saying is that you've already received the mercy, right? She has seen what many people who have attempted suicide and have later survived and expressed regret. She had the opportunity to walk away from a choice, to make a different one. She has the opportunity to live out the rest of her life, which is an opportunity her friend doesn't have. And that's more grace than any sentence can offer her, in addition to not serving what could have been a life sentence.
Yeah, deeply, deeply tragic case.